Welcome to another Midweek conversation at First Baptist Sweetwater, where we strive to be the first responders of God's love. My name is Jerry Hendricks, and I'm here with my longtime friend and fellow bread maker, Teak Hamilton.
Hi, Jerry.
It's a little different introduction than last week.
It is.
Because now I am a fellow bread maker.
Yes. And
you know why I say that, right?
Because you made the bread sundae?
I did make the bread sundae.
Yeah. I ordered linen bread bags on Amazon the other day. They store your homemade bread, and they don't let it get moldy as quick.
Oh.
So you need to order those now.
Good.
I'll keep you up to date on all the important bread stuff.
A good tip with Teak today.
Yep.
A little cooking tip, bread cooking tip.
Yep.
For whatever reason, I mean, we've always tried to find someone in our congregation that would make the bread as a part of being a part of the worship.
Right.
And this time I thought that I would try my hand at it. I had not done it before.
It was good.
And it was pretty good. I did have a little different experience. I think Sharon had done it once before, and so I did get some help in the kitchen because I wasn't sure how thin to roll it. But I got that last one. It's pretty. It's more like a cracker.
Yep.
Which I told you on Sunday. I think that's probably the way it's supposed to be. But around here, pretty consistently, it's been real moist and chewy and good. There's honey in it, and so that wheat flour.
Yeah, is it wheat flour? Whole wheat flour.
Yeah, and so that really stands out. But no, it's a good time. I enjoyed getting to do that. You helped me set up all the stuff Sunday, or set it out. We had a number of our
Steve
folks.
Hill helped with that.
Yeah.
Without him, there would have been a lot of loud noises while you were speaking.
Been a lot of the crashes.
Yes, because that was a big table, and he helped me get out there and get all set up. The wind was blowing and trying to blow the paper and the bread off, but he came through.
Yeah, well, we have some samples here. We do still have a few kits in the worship or in our office if you'd like to come by and get one. But it's the bread and then a juice, and then we included the Bible study that we've been doing each week through this series, which has been a little bit different for us to be able to do that. I know that we have one Bible study class that meets that they use the message text anyway.
Right.
So this is, rather than them being in the dark, this kind of gives them some insight 3 days before they meet for Bible study. But we made those available as well. So yeah, you kind of see the little setup or the kit that we have here on our table.
And this will build your health.
Grape juice says
100% of your vitamin C in that bottle right there.
Well, look at you. You read
But
that?
only 80% in orange juice bottles about that size.
Well, you've done your homework.
Interesting. Grapes have more vitamin C. I was surprised.
Tune in later for Teak's cooking show.
Ooh, yeah.
We could have fun with that. Yeah, we could have fun with that. But you've been really busy lately. I don't know how you'd have time.
Well, I'd make time for cooking. That's fun.
Well, so I don't doubt that you would. We also have some 213 Life masks. I explained the 213 Sunday. I don't do that frequently enough. When I first came here, we started talking about kind of our identification here at our church and kind of what we could do to generate community. And 213 is our physical address. And so we just went with Life Happens Here at 213.
Right.
And kind of stuck with that, came up with some graphics, and we've used that for about 5 years now.
Yeah.
We did have one response Sundays, a Facebook message that they appreciated the explanation. They had wondered what it was, thought it maybe was a scripture. And so to answer that, I said, I'm pretty sure that I went through every book of the Bible to see what chapter 2, verse 13 said, and none of them really worked well. So we stuck with that. But anyway, so we've got some masks here at the church. If you'd like to get one of those, you can do that. They're available on Sunday or through the office or the Lord's Supper kits. I had avoided calling it a kit during our conversations. And then over the weekend, I'm doing some website searches, and a friend of mine came up on Facebook, and I wanted to see where he was. I didn't know he was serving in a church, and he was in the Gulf Coast area, where the hurricane was coming through. And so I looked up his church, and the first thing that came up on their website, on their homepage, was that they were going to have communion kits kits available on Sunday. I go, there you go. It's okay to use that.
And this is a good kit. There are those kits out there that are like pre-made little cups with your wafer on top. No.
Had that conversation with someone this week. Yeah.
This is homemade bread, and the grape juice had a home somewhere.
There it is. Well, to kind of wrap it up Sunday, I talked about my experience with the most meaningful communion I'd been a part of, and I may have even mentioned that one in a podcast. But we know that a lot of folks, it may seem a little awkward to do this and with your family, but it's still, I think you find it becomes very meaningful for you if you'll just kind of participate in that, whether you're by yourself or with a spouse or with your family.
Right. It's amazing how often communion becomes the most memorable experience for people, on the good side or the bad side. I mean, you hear lots of stories about how communion went wrong, but then you hear the times that it was meaningful and it went right.
Right.
So,
well, we appreciate hearing your stories. We did hear from one of our listeners on Sunday, my college roommate. I don't know if I've shared that he is a pastor in Washington State, and he at some point during the week listens to our podcast, or not our podcast, but our worship service on Facebook. And he'll shoot me a message on Facebook, and he was telling me that one of his most memorable times was on a mission trip, or they had a mission group coming in, and everything had been really fragmented. The team wasn't coming together. It was towards the end of the week, and it had been just a daily struggle. And then a pastor that was with them asked to lead the evening time, and at that point led communion with them, and he said everything changed at that point. Cool. So you're right. There are those moments when we do experience this where it really stands out to us, and that's what we want to say Sunday, and reflecting on really more of a teaching style that I use Sunday, which I don't normally go that direction or speak in that form. I think the two main things to take away from what I shared Sunday is that you have to remember that communion and the Lord's Supper is a tradition, right? More than anything else. That there's nothing real instructional other than from the early churches. And so if you go back to the early churches, then different denominations can have different instructions for the way that it's carried out. And so we make probably more than we need to in terms of how it's done today in a church than what's necessary. But the other thing is that regardless of your experience with it, it really needs to have meaning. Right. And I think that's where all of us struggle, regardless of whether you do it like we do in our church infrequently, or whether you do it every week. Right. There's still that struggle on how you make it most meaningful.
I will say that our planning of when we do communion is very intentional. Right. We do it the Sunday after Easter, not on Easter Sunday, because it's really weird celebrating the death and resurrection at that moment when he is risen. Right. So we do it the next week and talk about in remembrance of Jesus. We don't do it on Christmas Eve or Christmas because, again, the baby being born versus, the death and resurrection. And so we try to space it out and make it intentional of when we do it. And so that's enjoyable.
And so folks may not agree with you and I, but we do talk about these things, and they're deeply meaningful for us, and we try to take steps that are meaningful for our church family.
Right. And it's okay to disagree with us. We're okay with that. Just don't be snarky about it.
Yeah. You can disagree with us. Tell a friend. So, but the other thing was, I know when in talking to other people about some of the things that would be preferential as far as how you serve communion. One of the things that we talked about in my last church was the idea of one bread. And I know that there are other denominations and churches that make a big deal out of that one bread, but the problem with that, I don't know what one bread means when you have a large congregation. Right. And so very simply, what my instruction was for our church then is that I've carried over to here. I haven't changed the small cups. I really like grape juice. Okay, so so I don't. That little cup is not enough for me.
Yeah.
I like at least the Dixie cup size,
Right.
And maybe the 9-ounce clear cup. Those are pretty good.
But not a little cup.
No, not that.
That's just enough to make you thirsty.
Cup. Yeah, I know. It's just like it doesn't even whet your appetite.
Right.
It just makes you think that it's wet.
Right.
Anyways, but
the best advice you've ever given me on serving communion.
Okay, on communion.
On serving communion was when we do baptisms, we have those people who've been baptized come up and we do communion separate for them,
right.
Using a goblet that they get to take home as a symbol of their first communion or a reminder of their first communion. But you said, don't pour too much. Don't get so caught up pouring it, because those are big glasses and someone's left with like a half of a glass of grape juice to take home.
Well, that advice came from my first mistake, because that was something, we haven't talked about this in some time, but, we do look at things in view of the Christian calendar,
right.
But also what we feel like fits our congregation.
Right.
We're not, we never intend to be guilty of trying to be like some other church.
Right.
And if you find something that we do that someone else is doing, we just kind of stumbled across it. We didn't really copy anyone. And so doing this of a First Communion, and particularly in a Baptist church, which is different, but it was so meaningful. Mm-hmm. And it wasn't even our idea.
Right.
It came from one of our deacons in our church that brought it up when we were thinking about, how to add meaning to the different things that we do. And it is really, really stuck and gone real well. But I do recall filling that, and it's a deep glass.
And you got a big pitcher.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Everybody's watching it there too.
And I like grape juice, so it was perfect for me. But it was, I don't know, several swallows, and then they weren't finished with it, and there wasn't a place to set their glass down.
And there's really no better visual of my blood being poured out than pouring from that pitcher to that goblet. Yeah. I mean, the visual, it all just fits so perfectly.
Right.
When we say we take it serious, we do.
Yeah.
It's not just tacked on.
Well, and coming back to this one bread idea, because we were a small church in Abilene, once we got into the routine of communion every week, we really emphasized one loaf.
Right.
And that was, I don't know, it adds more meaning to it. All these things, again, I think are things that help you in your faith, help you in your understanding, or put you in a place where you can better worship.
Right. And like you said, that's a preference. It's based on a preference, but it's got great symbolism, but then you think about the logistics of a church with 1,000 people. That's a big loaf of bread.
Right.
And that's not possible.
Well, and a word to pastors here. Assuming any other pastors are listening to our podcast, but let's just assume for a moment. Mm-hmm. Stop serving that 1/4-inch cracker that's been in the freezer.
Oh gosh, it's awful.
They're terrible.
That even fresh, they're terrible because they're not fresh. Those are, goodness.
That's what I grew up with, and that's when we established this at Cross Point. I basically said bread's got to taste good.
Yeah, and it should. It should be a moment that you remember for the good, not for the bad.
Right, exactly.
And I might have told this story already. If I did, bear with me. But Stacy talked about when she decided to follow Jesus, the time before, the communion before she made that decision, her mom had handed her some Smarties to eat because she wasn't allowed to have the bread and the juice. And so that made her go, wait, but I want... So then she goes and talks to her parents about what it means to follow Jesus and everything, and that leads to her salvation. But at the same time, she said, if I had known how bad that bread tasted, I wouldn't have been I would have stuck with my Smarties all these years. And it's so true that you don't want to be stuck with, it's communion, I got to force this down, and then have just enough juice to make your mouth water even more and dry from the chiclet.
Right. So true. Well, so we do it several times a year here, and one of the things that I believe we had shared is that we intended to do this after Easter Sunday, and with the pandemic and shutdown, we didn't at that point hadn't really figured out a good way to do it, and it was still kind of early on. But this one seemed to fit this series. In fact, it was in sermon planning when I saw that we were planning on doing it the Sunday prior to Thanksgiving, because people are thinking about the table.
Right.
And so we went ahead and set up this series for that, and wanted to conclude the series with communion. So,
if you have questions about communion, we'd love to talk to you about those.
We sure would.
You can post them on here. You can text us, call us. We'll share with you everything we do. I mean, we love those type of conversations.
It's what we. Yes, we do.
Yeah, we can even go back to Old Testament and talk about it. We'll have fun.
So this was going to be the end of the series.
Right.
We've moved around our schedule due to us not being gone, having any guest speakers, or changing our routine any. So it's meant more Sundays that we stay or can stick with our series. And so in getting ready and doing some planning into the fall for how the different series and messages would fall, it just struck me that an idea of talking about after the table.
Right.
And specifically on Sunday, we're not talking necessarily not only about the crucifixion events, the trial and those events, but just really using that theme for our life about what the difference our life makes once we leave the table.
Right.
And so that's kind of where we're headed on Sunday. I think it's going to be I believe, a thought-provoking idea for us to kind of wrap our minds around and have some good conversation about. Don't forget that we will have on our website a interactive Bible study, and you can download that. It's available usually up on their site by Thursday night anyway.
Right.
And you can look at that, and it'll have some questions along with the text and a way to approach that. So it's been a good series. We said last week, it's been one of those that will stand out for us for a while now as generating a lot of conversation.
Oh, yeah.
And that's, that was kind of what we had talked about when you think about how worship for us has been over the last few months. It just seemed fitting that an imagery of coming together would be important. And so it's certainly been that for us. And appreciate you folks joining us in this process. And we look forward to Sunday and to life after the table.
See you then.